Hi. Hi, how are ya? Just turn it down now. Hold on. Turning down my Kasabian. Music of the day, Kasabian. Okay. Hi. Yesterday, we did a really fantastic piece together. We worked hand in hand to create the hot sexy. That's what you see here. Example beside me. Which side? This side. Example beside me. You see. Forget it. You see the hot sexy. Jeffrey Bezos. Anyways, so yeah, yesterday I tried to show a bunch of examples about all the different ways in which you can use a whole bunch of mixed media, a whole bunch of different tools, a whole bunch of different mark making materials to make your images and to really push and prod yourself along. So I'm continuing on that kick, if you know what I mean. So yeah, so I continued on. So that was the page we did yesterday. Was painting of Big Sexy, and I got my setup fixed again so that ooh, pretty pictures. I'm able to get a little bit better color on things here now, a little better representation. So some of the images that I did yesterday, I didn't think you could really see while I was working. You couldn't really see some of the colors. So we fixed that. I put the setup back the way it was. But my problem was that I didn't have a large enough working space. I like a little bit of room around me. And everything was just sort of compacted. So I've been slowly streamlining that process. So now that my actual working top is 3x3, it gives me a little bit of space to play. A little bit of place to play. So yeah. So anyway, so this is what I started this morning. It's another little mixed media one-page approach here. I'm not. A couple of things that I'm going to do is after I get all these panels done, I'm going to tighten it up and clean it up a little bit in the computer. But in the meantime, so one of the things about this is it's got ink wash, acrylic, different pencils, medium. And what I mean by medium is some sealing medium, and at the same time some different matte medium. It's a little satin finish stuff is in there to lock a layer down. But then we've also got a little bit of that bleach action that I did yesterday with the hot sexy, and so we're continuing on that. I scanned the piece I did yesterday, and I put it up on Instagram and Facebook. So, woohoo! So I've asked the question for today: is your work somehow uniquely you? It's the magic miracle question that I think we need to ask ourselves more as we're working. Is that what am I doing, and how is what I'm doing have something to either say with my voice or how I interpret things, or stylistically, is it me and how I'm approaching my work? And this is a thing that I always have a personal challenge with, is because I'm as wishy-washy as I am, and I tend to work in multiple different medium and multiple different surfaces, and painting and illustrating on heavier stock paper, and drawing on traditional comic pages, and working digitally. I tend to be a little bit all over the place. So I just want to give you a quick shot of and see if I can move this camera. Just give me one sec. Bear with me. Let's see if it's going to do it, or if it's going to be a finicky sucker. Okay, so over here beside, yeah, no, it's not going to let me. Forget it. Over here beside my desk, you can see I have a whole bunch of different mark making material, and it's about 3 layers high, 2 units deep. There's all kinds of drawers. There's all kinds of smaller drawers up above. And all of these different mark making tools is the sort of stuff, my little arsenal. That sounds fancy. Arsenal. that I keep handy for while I'm working. And then, of course, I've got the surface itself. And I'll get a better shot of that and post that up so that maybe in the visual image of that, there might be some ideas about different tools that sometimes we don't consider when we're working. Oh, yeah, why don't I try that too? And in that way, it sort of liberates some people to think outside that box and to approach, any of the story or any of the images that they're doing in different ways. So I'm going to get cracking right into it, and crack-a-lackin', as we call it in the old country. If anybody has any questions or anybody has any thoughts, or if anybody has any response to my question of the day, feel free to put it in the chat or in the comments, and or romantic pigeon messages that you send to me by exotic birds. So, okay. So here's what I'm doing at this point. This is Post-its because I can't seem to just not do different things. I'm going to show an example of something. Yep. Here is a page that I'm going to pull up and switch the camera over. So this is an example of a page. There we go. This page has got, this is a one-page comic that I did called As the Cookie Rumbles. And let's drop the banner up for a moment. So as the cookie rumbles, the text was put in the computer, but everything otherwise is put in process. And so what I've got here is a ballpoint, dipping pen, different colored ballpoints, like there's a green ballpoint in there, but the surface is Post-its and masking tape and a little bit of paint here and there, but different colored Post-its, like an orange and a yellow. And the reason that there's so much surface modulation in something like that is that, again, one of the big challenges that I have is the white piece of paper, right? There's a daunting thing for some reason about blank paper that can hold us back sometimes from our creative endeavors. And so one of the processes that I came up with personally for myself years ago was to eliminate that factor, and by monkeying up the surface that I was working on. And whether that's putting some layer of something or whatnot down, or just smashing a bunch of paint on it so it's messy. And what I mean by that is, just painting over the surface and not being too particular about color or value. And then, or putting tape or paper into the surface of a page. So this is gel medium or matte medium I'm using. It doesn't matter. It's a adhesive when applied as such. So just coating some of that down, and then I lay the page down, the paper down on top of the paper, and it's nice and flat. Woohoo, we win. So that's it. That's what I do. I like to do that when I'm doing some images, just because it gives a variation underneath the surface. And if you notice, the first panel that I've done has got a lot of yellow base to it. Now I'm going to hit some more colors and values into that to sort of push and pull it. But by throwing down these Post-its, these little pieces of Post-it anyways, in the way that I'm doing, it's going to monkey with this surface. It's going to, but at the same time, it's maintaining this yellow foundational value that the page is structured around. And I'm not overly particular about placement. I'm not overly particular about, is it clean? Is it ripped? Is it whatever it is? None of that stuff really matters to me. What really matters to me is just getting into it and just mucking up the surface. And if this is a way that starts me off, so be it. The different thing that I'm doing here from some of the other examples I've shown with masking tape or things like that is that I'm not putting medium over top of it yet. And the reason that I'm not putting it over top of it yet is that I'm going to draw on this with pencil crayon, so that the more that you seal the surface up, the less that you have the ability to put some different mark making medium on it. So that's the thinking behind that. Now, yesterday I drew, when I started drawing this, hey, it's 7, everybody. More hot sexy. Yeah, I can't have too much hot sexy. That was just a continuation of the Jeffy Basil's piece, starring my 2 oldest grandkids. So I cleaned up my space a little bit today to set up a larger workstation for myself. And doing so has enabled me to be able to stretch it out a little bit. Stretch it out. So, okay, so I got the 2 characters I've established here. And this guy is in behind this guy. We've already set that. So if I'm going to establish the directional flow of the page with the word balloons being associatively placed up inside of here, that can carry over into this panel up here before we drop down to that one. So we can move the direction, even though these characters are relatively static, we can move the direction of the eye through their conversation. So I'm going to bring it over here and bring it down through there. So my intent here is to take our guy that was in the foreground on this image and I have him turn so that he's talking to his pally Allie. So I'm trying to keep the engagements in the proper order, so that this guy is in front of this guy, et cetera, et cetera. And it's that sort of stuff that as we're structuring our page, we need to think about those 2 elements. One is where are people in relationship to one another, and can we maintain that? And 2 is can we maintain the directional flow of the page through our images or our dialogue? It needs to be one or the other, and one or the other should not interfere with its pairing. And so if I'm going to place people in certain directions in certain places, then I have to that don't move the action, that don't move the flow of the page. Then what does need to move the flow of the page is the dialogue balloons. So and conversely, if you've got a lot of motion in your page, if you lay your page all over with dialogue balloons, and this is a real problem that they have in a lot of action comics, is that when you've got if Spider-Man's swinging through the air and there's 15 different word balloons, if he's been Bendis, that's what I call it. If he's been Brian Michael Bendis, so he's got 15 word balloons around his head, any of that action or momentum that the artist took their time to put into that panel to give a directional flow, whether it's jumping out into the viewer or whatever it is, just got completely disrupted by too much text. So good on you there, bud. And then of course I'll show a couple examples in a little bit about different ways that you can use different things in combination with each other, so that you can mix and match what it is that you're doing in your panels and your pages. I am going to jump the shark here and just jump right into using, I've got this fountain pen here. I'm just going to, rather than being precious about, your work up from pencils or whatever it is that you do, I'm just going to throw right down into this ink right off the hop and, get busy. Get busy, yo! So I'm thinking about the structure of the character and how his lines would move relatable to how we already established some of these lines of form in the previous panel. So if he's got this raised collar here, I've got to continue that raised collar over there. So that's a little bit of that line there, what is a stinker. but that's okay because we're going to muck this up in a second a little bit. Push or pull this ink around. Get some fun going with it. Yeah, so it's a more comfortable setup I've got today. Looks great. Thank you, Seven. You need to level up your illustration. This is inspirational. Well, hello. Well, I'm glad to hear that. But leveling up our stuff as we're going. There you go. Stepping at the reference. It's a natural process. It's going to happen. It's just going to be the case that as you work more, anything that you do more of, and everything that you pop the cork on, in the sense that it just becomes something you're just dialed into. Don't be too precious about stuff. Don't be having to be somebody else. Don't understand the foundational rules of how something works. And then push them. Go with it, and see what you can make of that, and see how far you can take something like that. That's the whole piece of fun. Whoops, I got the working monkey in the way. Sorry about that, folks. That's my working monkey. Work. Let's go. And I don't know if you need to see my big gob, so I might jump out of here too. Let's move that over. All right, so happy. I'm stifling a sneeze. Yeah, today's music is Kasabian. Yeah, that's the Kasabian album. Just the self-titled album. If you don't know Kasabian, try them out. They're fun. So I've got his arm raised as he's putting his phone away. But I can push things along a little bit here this way. Yeah, I don't think that I'm going to go with a collar here. I'm going with an open shirt. And so when I'm drawing this image in, I'm just not being too precious about it. I'm just working right over top of the different pages or the different colors of paper that I've put down. And that allows me to just move on and not be too concerned about how the image is moving across the paper right now, other than the principal layout that we just talked about. But what I mean by that is how the materials flow together is something I'm going to work more and more in, so that as we go along, I'm going to take this white paper, and of course we're going to try to root some more of that yellow wash into the background so that it has some similarity to the previous image. So by drawing this guy in with the ink, it saves X time, sure, but at the same time, there's workup I have to do to get us to where I want it to be with him. And then we've got his compatriot, who now gets to be brought a little forward into the conversation. But these are two bad people. So I'm just using a couple of thin little lines here, bringing up some of these parts of this character. Not defining everything by the ballpoint or by the fountain pen, sorry. I like how loose the ink is in these things, but I would suggest this is an 03, and I have another one that's an 05 for the nib size. I like the 03 for drawing, but the 05 is good for chunky inks. And you can see there's quite the difference between the two, in that the 05 line, of course, is much heavier. But that's, again, everybody's going to have a preference of which type they like to use. And something is very, what did I say was bad? I don't know. 7 is making a note of something I already forgot I said. Keep track of me, 7. Keep track of what this maniac is espousing to the world. So I'm pursuing this character's costume to be at least matching to some extent to what we put him in down below. The lines don't have to be the same, but we want it to at least identifiably be recognizable as the same guy. All right, so we've got that ink in, and just threw down these character shapes together really quick. Oh, these guys are very bad people. Yeah, very bad people here. These aren't nice guys. Because good stories need to be compelling. Images need to be compelling, and in that compelling aspect of whatever images that we're putting together and looking at, they have to have, something that motivates us further to want to find out who these characters are, to want to understand how these guys interact with the world around them. And they can't always be good guys. I think sometimes more interesting stories can be found in people making bad decisions. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're just bad people. I'm talking about bad decisions. So sometimes that hand is forced. Sometimes they have no other option or opportunity but to have to do the bad thing. Sometimes they feel compelled to do the bad decision because life has given them lemons and all they got is that certain kind of juice. So, it's something to pursue. It's something to have some fun with and chasing down different stories with different types of characters. So, hey, Gary, how you doing, buddy? Gary Hodges has joined us, folks. So this is what I'm talking about, where I'm going to throw in some of this yellow paint and tie the Post-its that I've placed into the image, into the surface before putting the image over top. Well, I'm going to try to unify those to some extent by bringing a matching paint around the image, but not entirely covering it up, because I like that you can tell it's there to some extent. You got to have some recognition that this isn't all one sheet of paper. That's the whole point. I put the paper down is to play around in the image a little bit. Now I'm going to do a really light little bit of medium in here just to see what that does with this ink. And it's going to smudge it a little bit and make it somewhat discolored, but that's okay. I'm going to use that towards their suits, the values in their suits. No gray is really gray. And so if you're drawing a gray suit that you have in a color image, feel free to have a different value in it. Just gives it a little bit more body, gives it a little bit more something. Hey now. Okay, so we've got that in here. Spritzer. This is just a water spritzer. That it's not like the bleach that's going to bleed out the colors. But with the water in here, it is going to destabilize and soften up some of these sharp ink lines that I did, and then a little bit of dripping, a little bit of leakage. But I just want to just play with it because we can play with it, right? All right, so okay, so we've got another hit to these guys. I really like. I cleaned up today and changed things a little bit. Just got myself just a tiny bit more organized. And in doing so, I really like how I have better access to so many different things. It makes me very, very happy. Okay, so I'm putting some acrylic on this brush, and my intent is to just try to get the acrylic down and not move the brush around too much. Moving the lines or moving the ink lines around because I don't want to really smudge it too much. So I'm just kind of just laying these hits of acrylic over top. And then the same here. There's not as much ink here, so I can be a little more aggressive. Happy. I keep looking for the cloth in front of me because I habitually started doing that yesterday, and now I've moved the cloth to where it should be, and I got to reprogram my brain not to always think it's going to be right there. All right, so I put some white out onto my palette. I put some white onto my palette, not white out. Sorry, should be clear. I put some white on my palette so that I can come in and do the same thing as I've done with the yellow in areas where now I'm putting those little pinches of white into the shirts. And playing with that. A bit of surfacing on their faces. Thinking as I go about the planes of the face, the different plateaus and shapes that we have in our faces, as I'm just doing a couple little light hits here. So I'm still finishing the Village Haunted pages, but I'm also working on something else. But I'm going to be doing these little one-page things again for a little bit. If anybody has suggestions of one-page ideas within reason, right? And what I mean by within reason is don't send me a script. I'm not going to do that. But if you've got a suggestion, like some of the things that I've done before are, which you can see copies of in my book, One Page Comic Extravaganza, available on my website. You like that? Schlocky. Frankenstein Monster Goes to Kindergarten. That's a one-page comic suggestion. If you give me a paragraph, I promise you I'm not doing it. Okay, there's a guy, and he lives in a place, and so he goes to this thing, right? And he's got, not doing it. It's already too much. Simple sentences, simple suggestions, and let it go. Like Nicolas Cage as the Queen talking about the pandemic. That was a suggestion. That's in the last volume. And Antonio Banderas is too sexy. That was a suggestion. The cookie piece that I showed you was just Day the chocolate chips and came up against the ginger snaps. That was a fun suggestion. So there's all kinds of things. It literally is just a case of keeping it simple. So there's some white down there. And sorry, I keep forgetting to pay attention to what people are saying. Hi, Gary. Hi, Seven. Seven says hi to Gary too. Okay, so all right. So now I want to try something different here. This is just a typical old marker, inexpensive marker from the dollar store. But I want to throw some of this in here into the image and see what happens when I spritz it with some alcohol, or I'm sorry, some bleach in a moment. So there's a couple other things that you can do that I wanted to talk about too. You can, if you take rubbing alcohol, if you do a photocopy of something, so just run off a photocopy of whatever, and face that image down onto your surface that you're working on, paperboard, whatever it is, and you rub the back of it with the tissue or something that's got rubbing alcohol on it. And so just rub that. It should transfer that photocopy onto your paper. Oh, Philip Chandler's joined us. Hi, Phil. So it should transfer onto your paper, so you can get some really fun textures doing that. There we go. That's a big spray. Anyways, and what that can do for you is allow you to have all kinds of fun in the sun with that, where you've got these little textures, these little smudges and stuff like that are pushing into. Oh, see, that's a lot of fun. I like that little discoloration that's happening in here. This is the stuff to look for. I'm going to try this. You can see little orange hits coming in now. There we go. Let's see what that does. So I use my hand as a shield to block off the other area so I could get a couple little bits of bleach pumped onto here. Now, if I don't, you can see how it's fading out the hair and turning that into a brown and eliminating the orange inexpensive marker that we just put down. So I'm going to tamp this out at this point and just remove that for a second. There's the lid. Always put the lid back on your things. So, and this is another tool that I'm really happy to have back in the studio, is a fan. The problem is that you're going to have to bear with the sound for every time I do this. So the reason for the fan as a key ingredient to whenever I'm working is that it expedites the process so that my pages don't bubble up as I'm going through it. And it sort of stops processes along the way because things are allowed to dry out. Phil has asked, what am I working with today? Who do I want to be today? Okay, so I've got everything under the sun. I showed the mess of materials that I have over here in the studio, and I will take a better picture of that and post that for tomorrow. But so that you can see the amount of stuff, the amount of mark making jazz that I have in here. But I've got acrylics, I've got inks, I'll hit some watercolor in there too. I've got markers, I've got pencils, pencil crayons. This is a fountain pen that I used to initially draw this in with. Nice little standard calligraphic tip. Hi, my name is Larry. So, you know, Tom Cruise changing a light bulb. I hate Tom Cruise. I'm sorry. Tom Cruise changing a light bulb, Mission Impossible style. Or opening a jar of peanut butter. That's, okay. I'm going to write it down on my list over here. I'm going to write on this post-it first, and then we'll add to the list. So for those that are joining late, the difference of these yellow squares that you see in here, this is actual post-its, pieces of post-it that I've put into the image. So Tom Cruise opening a jar of peanut butter, I like. That's a lot of fun. I'm going to put that down, 7. That's something that we're going to look at doing in the future here. All right, great. Thanks, 7. So anybody else has any one-page comic ideas, keep them short and sweet like that. All right, so this is fun. I used one of these inexpensive dollar store markers, laid in this orange image, but then when I spritzed it with some bleach, you can see it's taken some of it right out of there. And I love stuff like that. So that's my jam. So now that we've dried the image out a little bit with the fan, it's going to let me go in with the pencil crayon and work in some value. Now, otherwise, it's not going to let you do that because unfortunately, it's you know, it's going to be too soluble. It's going to be too wet, and it's just there's too much cushion for your mark making. So, sorry, I missed something. Oh, reminds me of courtroom illustrations. Oh, that's cool. Okay. So I'm just throwing in a couple little marks into this guy's face and adding a little more depth to him, rounding out some of his features a little bit. And we go back into his pal here and do a little bit of the same. So now I had some of this information in here before, but when I went over it really loosely and roughly with the acrylic, it took that out. So we're just going to put some of that back down. And while it might feel somewhat repetitive, you're going to have a put down a takeaway situation happen while you're working with mixed medium in layers. So I just noticed something. I put my brush back. I couldn't find the brush where I was looking for it. And, oh, that's right, Philip. Yeah. I put it back. See if I can pull some more of the black out of this ink. Push this around. But I like the orange spots. I like little details like that, little bumps that you get inside of the images as you're. I did it again. I put it back again. Always replace your tools. Yeah, that's a rarity. Okay, so I'm coming in here with some white. Bringing back in some of the things that I might have made. I know I made an error on this color before, so I get to just put some hits back in on that. And the fun part of working in layers that I always find is that it lets you develop an image in these sort of stages that you're going to get details. And I wish I could, I hope it picks up here, but there's a dot from the bleach in the center of the eye, a little bit of orange. And there's because I went loosely over this part of the eye socket with the orange pencil crayon as well, it's gonna sort of given this wonderful little piece of language that's going on inside of that eye, which gives it far more character than I might have done had I done that intentionally. And that's kind of why I like working in different media and pushing and pulling different things. If anybody's looking for some reading homework, there are some artists that I would recommend. And if it, if you're looking in the arts community and specifically in the comics community, look up Vanguard Publishing. It's a publisher from the 80s, 90s, and they published an awful lot of painterly books by different people. What I mean by that is these are little sort of life story assessments about different creators and the different processes that they took and how they work. There's your standards like Bill Sienkiewicz and guys like that, but that most people don't know. But there's so many others to check out. Kent Williams, John Van Fleet, George Pratt. A lot of these guys from that time period had an awful lot of interesting things to say. All right, so I'm going to play a little bit with some watercolor into here and just play with some little values that going to add a little bit of dimension to our characters. Now this is a burnt umber that I'm using. You could look into a new income stream. I don't want to do courtroom drawings. There's some pretty professional guys that do that. This is my jam. It's what I'm doing now. As far as it goes for additional income streams, I'm all right. This is I got enough work to do right now. I thank you for the idea, though, fellas. Okay, so I'm adding some of that umber watercolor into, and because we did that tamping down earlier, but the different little bits of light water brushing into the ink, that ink is all staying solid at this point, so I don't have to worry about everything bleeding out and washing out in the image. I want to get some of that granulation in there, though, with some pencil in a moment to push some of these values around a little bit and to push around the image a bit more. Don't want it to be too static when I've got this wonderful little bits of energy that moves your eye around. Now, when I'm looking at these things, how much, and this is the problem of us as creatives, is that we're going to look at things that we're doing in a completely different way than anybody that is going to engage in reading whatever stories that we might have, or seeing whatever images that we might have illustrated. They are not going to look at it how we look at it. They are not going to, in any sort of remote fashion, find the little nuance that, oh, I put that in there for my viewers. For the most part, they're not going to see it. They're not going to connect to that stuff. And that's largely because we overthink these things compared to the people that view our work. I think there's merit to that. I'm a big proponent of it. I think that there's definitely merit to thinking about as we're working. I'm not going to ever say no, but you got to allow that. You got to allow the fact that people are going to assess your work on whatever level they're going to do it. So there are going to be efforts that you're going to make in any images that you do that are never going to be experienced by the people reading it, or viewing it, applying to two-dimensional single image as well. Well, even in a two-dimensional single image, there's still reading going on. Even watching an animation, there's reading going on. And what I mean by that is that you're reading that information, you're taking that information in. Okay, so I'm throwing in some of this pencil crayon into the background. This is probably about a 2 lead, I would argue, that I'm using right now. See how, because of some of the stuff that we had happen earlier, there's this discoloration here that holds on. See, that's the stuff that I'm always looking for. So throwing in some more lines to build up our image, but the focus is not on the background. So I'm not overly concerned about how much time and effort's going into the background because it's not the focus. We're going to push it back a little bit here as we go and not be overly concerned about it, because the objective is to keep the viewers' focus and attention right here through their dialogue. So I don't know. It's the constructive decisions that we need to make. This is a green as opposed to the blue that I've been using. Just throwing in shapes. And those shapes, as they cut through a space, sometimes informs us creatively of what we need to do next in the image. Okay. but it's given a little bit of consistency anyhow. And despite the fact that there's a modulation in the surface from where I put the post-its down, you can see how, ideally, hopefully, you can see how they're embedding into the image. There's parts where they still pull through, like this yellowing effect that's in this entire area where there's a post-it underneath that surface. The same here, of course, there's a clear yellow that's coming through. But then there's this other one that's this other post-it that's in his face that's half completely covered up and doesn't have any weight to it anymore at this point. So that's one of the reasons why I like doing redonkulous things like that, because it just lets me, it's the way I'm dancing, if that makes sense for folks. Well, I had a black pencil, and I'm going to throw a little bit more ink and remember to put away your thing that you're going. This is a common thing that I don't know about other people, but when I'm working, this is a common thing where I have this many things in one hand. It's just part of my process. I guess it's just you know, it's handy. It's handy to have everything available for whatever it is that I'm working on in any given moment. So just putting down a static background of just pieces of information. And then what am I going to throw in here? This is ink that I've got down right here inside of the an ice cube tray, and so I'll dribble some ink in there, and it's nice because it has this lid that locks into it. That well, it just makes it just fine and dandy. Because this is ink that I squeezed out in yesterday's thing into the tray, and it's still completely viable ink for me to use right now, which is a nice thing to have that stuff be available for me. Try different colored inks. Go for it. Just play, have fun, try them out. They're going to work in whatever ways they're going to work. But denying yourself the opportunity to try those inks is, there's no point for that. Have some fun. Play. There's no rule sheet here on how you're supposed to do things. This is just, there's one thing that I can example to people is that, throw everything at the board and see what sticks. This is what I'm talking about with this really nice locking tray on it. I was really excited to find this. My wife's with me as we're at this dollar store, and she just looks at me like I'm a nut for the things that I'm throwing into the cart. Why? Because she knows me well. Okay, so back into the white acrylic as I'm going to cut out some shapes in around some of these pieces of information that we are given by the different layers as we were putting them down. It sort of gave us some little insights of some fun things that we could do to add some depth to our image. And so just builds up the background, gives it some fun things happening there. Suggests, this could be signage, or this could be, well, whatever it could be. But I'm also trying not to wipe out everything that we've built up along the way. Just allowing some things to happen on their own. Because it's not the focus. Focus is old Jack and Joe. I don't have names for these guys. Jack and Joe here. This is the thing about being impetuous and working on the fly, is that I don't have everything laid out immediately. But, you find that stuff anyways. I think I got some of this at a place like Giant Tiger. I think my youngest just came home because I can hear a herd of elephants above me. Okay, so this is a cobalt blue that I'm putting in here, which is a nice muted blue that when you put that in, wet it out, it works really great as a substitute for gray. And it allows you to put in a value that sort of diffuses the intensity of a space without it just being this muted sort of flat gray that you put down. And this is, so these are some watercolor blocks that I have. I found them at a bookstore in a small town that my wife and I were visiting one day. I can't remember. It's Bayfield. It's Bayfield. I consider doing courtroom sketches, but they work so fast. I don't think I'd have the speed for it. I've done it once, and because there's some law courses that I took back in the day, and I just did it because I'm always carrying a sketchbook. So of course I was going to try it while I was there. Because I'm able to work really fast, the courtroom sketches, it's to do it all the time. And you've got to have a real facility for immediate likenesses of people, because you don't have a lot of time to find that likeness. So I think it's a very set, criteria for the people that have the facility to do that. And power to them. But you're right, Phil. You got to move like the wind to get these images down. Here's a serial killer. Every one of your serial killers looks like generic round-faced person. He said he's going to go into a panic. But actually, that's kind of funny when you think about it. That'd be a fun one-page story to do. The world's worst courtroom. I think I heard a ghost walk in. The world's worst courtroom sketch artist, or police sketch artist, and everything that he releases is so generic and bad looking that but for some reason this is the person they keep coming back to use. I think that's a lot of fun. You can cause some really good chaos in the streets with that. All right, maybe I carry less things in my hand. I like doing this. I can't tell you what it is that makes me spackle paint in everything I'm doing. I like some of those opportunities that come out of that. It's just little bits of language in my mind. It just gives a little more something interesting to look for. And there doesn't have to be an explanation. It's my picture. It's the same goes for you. It just doesn't really have to be an explanation for why you're doing things stylistically. You're doing them because in some place in your head that's connecting. So, right? All right, I think I'm ready to just move on to the next panel. First, I want to put some green in his hair. Why? Just first, guys. It's my favorite green, by the way. A drab green or an olive green. It's my favorite. It's actually my favorite color in general. You can see the Post-it notes. Nice. Good stuff. That's the idea. Okay, so I'm going to give a little bit of moment for that to dry. Excuse me for the fan or the dryer again. So once this little bit here dries, I'm going to throw down some pencil crayon and off we go to the next panel. But you can see how much that just speeds up the whole process. And it makes your pages so warm and cuddly. All right. Okie dokie. Now on to the next thing. Come along with me, let's boogaloo. All right. Here's a drinking game. Count how many times I say all right while I'm working. Okay, so I picked up these guys recently, and I really like them. They're so fun, these different pencil sets. And they're themed on the value system. And I likes it. I likes it a lot. Yeah, this is another little, I have a little locking tray that I have for sharpening my pencils in. So I had an idea for this page that I was going to establish blood in the gutters, which sounds really dark and grim, but hey. Just to push a story note, but at the same time control the directional flow of my page. And so I'll show you what I mean in a sec. Not always using black for the hard line areas. Just keeps it more interesting, and everything isn't just a flat uniform thing. Back in my animation school days, when we were learning background painting, we were taught about the psychology of color, something I like to learn more about. Yeah, please do. I mean, there is so much fun that you can do. There's so many things that you can apply with just a value of color. I think that just inserting a color into a scene can change the emotional sense of a scene in a really strong way. I would suggest that by having static shifts, like I'm trying to think of the name of the film. I think it's Don't Look Now, Donald Sutherland. It's a film from the 70s. And the father's trying to find his little girl through the streets of this. Or I'm sorry, I think the couple's getting over the loss of their little girl. And they go on a vacation. And while they're on said vacation, he sees his little girl. And, every time he sees this little red raincoat, this little girl, he tries to follow her. And every time he just kind of loses her in a crowd. And the subjective question is this real? Is it happening? Or is this all in the father's head? Because bearing in mind, he's a person in grief, right? So is it real or not? And so because of that, you're always wondering as the viewer about what specifically is the situation at hand. And I like that a lot. And the reason that I like that is because the red becomes an emotional signifier in that film, because every time we see the red raincoat, he goes into a state of desperation and searching. And so there's an emotional equivalent to to our association of just a value. That's really cool stuff. And we can use that to our benefit story-wise. Having a good understanding of how colors work together is absolutely essential, though, if anybody's using color in any way. And then also throwing that rule book out the window. There are tools that you can get. Oh, God, hold on. I got to unbury it. Underneath the whole stack of tape. This is a color wheel, and so you can see how the interactions of color work together. Okay, and just here's the quick one. Here's your complementaries across from each other, right? Your tetrad is your offset from addition or subtraction. And the tetrad for the green would be a yellow green, right, to the blue. And what that means is that, there's your jump for your cool range. And of course, the opposite set to that would be where you start looking into the yellow-orange area of it and how that balances out against those. Your triad colors, your orange, your green, and your violet together, right? And of course, your split comp. You can see how many different things are on here on the base. But I think analogous colors, which isn't written down here, is colors that are aside from one another. There's so many things that you can figure out, even if you're just holding it like this, without using the adjustments on the wheel to start to find out how different things engage with each other. And then, of course, there's your standard. If you've got yellow and you add red, you're going to get this. If you've got a yellow-green and you add yellow, you're going to get that. And so how this informs you on the back side of this, again, this turning wheel, and you can see how colors engage in different ways. You can find these things in art supply stores near where the paints are being sold. Because ideally, they're trying to move their product that's in that store and get you to look at these different colors and go, oh, well, I need that color. I need this color because when I add blue to it, well, I get that brown or this reddish brown. And, I want all of these colors at the very minimum. And they show you how you can get so many more. But again, it's something to get a basic understanding of and then run away from that. Right? Once you got that fundamental understanding of that in a really simplistic way, go, make some pictures, play, defy those conventions. Look at different combinations of how things work to be offsetting. The more that you use these sort of putrid colors of moss greens and yellows and things like that is intentional to make you feel alienated and uncomfortable. The more that you use a high focus color in a composition, if a composition is largely cool grays and blues and things like that, and you have somebody in a bright yellow raincoat, you're going to notice a person in bright yellow coat. If you've got a piece that's just resonates with any single color more so than everything else and against everything else, watch that punch through the roof, right? Warren Beatty did an interesting thing when he did the Dick Tracy movie in the 1,000 years ago, and where he used primaries and just primaries and secondary colors. That's it. And very muted differences in that. Like if you had a dark brown suits on a dark brown suit on this guy would have a intermediate brown, and this guy would have the tertiary brown, so that you had these three different browns sitting at the same table, but they worked in correlation with each other under a green light. And so, the table itself is painted blue and the background in the room has got red walls. It's like this kind of kaleidoscopic thing, but because of the high contrast light and dark that's in that shot, every one of those colors is a form, is an object, is function as object. So very seldomly do we see that level of attention in projects, I would suggest that the guy that did Midsummer has put some assessment into that. The person that did Haunting of Hill House put some understanding into the contrast and push and pull of light with colors. So there are some television and film projects that really exemplify that, but it's just kind of hard and complex to explain anywhere. It's really a case of sit down with a color wheel like this and teach yourself, learn how things work together and play. I think that may well be the easiest way for a lot of people to really get a good grasp of it. But color is one of those things where I don't know that it's absolutely necessary to have in a lot of projects. And when you do have it in said projects, to punch at it in a different way. There's a really great animator that I like named Yuasa, and he has a whole bunch of different projects. But to see the different ways that he uses color and in his different projects, specifically look up Mind Game and see the different ways that he uses color and form. And just because I'm contrarian, I'm going to throw some dark value in there too. And so this is just giving a little more, little more play, little more fun little things happening through the image. What are you doing, Corbin? Leave that alone. Stop. Corbin does not like that I'm facing away from him, but he's going to get used to it. He has to. All right. So last little thing. Okay. Just for scuzz. Next panel. Yeah, so as with anything else, it's just a case of trying to find something. Magenta, yellow, and cyan are supposed to be the new primaries. Yeah, they're just other names. They're just variations on tone. Yellow, magenta, and cyan are the three. That's your red, yellow, and blue for printing. But you don't have to. Your primaries are whatever you want to use. There's a number of different palettes that people have used over time. And it's like different bands have different tuning signatures for their music making. Sonic Youth tunes all their instruments to E, whereas most other people are turning their instruments to A. So it's just one of those things. All right, so I've got some static panels that I can put into a page here. I'm going to do one last thing. There's not much on there to have to use the fan, so I'm just going to bring a little bit of emphasis to the eyes. Let their faces speak a little bit more. Made a mess of that. And throw some more black into this guy's hair specifically. But let some of that bleachy brown still climb through. Good. Okay. So the next panel, I'm going to have the two of them walking So this is the 03 fountain pen that I described earlier. 03 is the size of the nib. All right. Yeah, color fields, notwithstanding, whatever you use as your palette is what your basic colors are. I would argue, because nobody gets to tell you what the correct values are for you to use. There's an awful lot of different palette layouts. You know, even Bob Ross had a specific kind of palette that he had on his show, his TV show. Boy, yeah, words got really hard there for a second. All right, I'm just playing around here, and okay, here I go. So now that I've got the two guys talking, now's our talk and walk. So I'm just going to throw them in really loose, and because this is a really brief page, I'm not overly concerned about lots of, this is sort of like an establishing page to a concept. And we're just trying to get a singular point across in an image like this. So I'm just playing with some shapes and figuring out his suit. And see what that tells me, what that gives me for movement. Do I have, yeah, he's the one with the suit, at the tie, I'm sorry. See, when I got this wonderful, I don't know if you can see this, I really enjoy the spattering that's in his neck here, and I don't have it there. That annoys me. So I'll probably come back in and do a couple more little unifying things as I go. See, I'm being overly precious right now. Cool it with them preciousness there, pal. Huh? Get it down there. What are you doing? Sometimes you need to go fast and cheap and loose in your page to keep that energy. And you're going to lose that if you're overly concerned with, you know, your lines that you're making or how you're using the space itself. So the intent is for these guys to be walking loosely out of the page, out of the panel, and moving on into the next page. So I'm going to be pushing how they move through the space, and then as they're clearly about to go and, well, basically do something bad. And this is the one that has, so he has the collar. And then I think I want to have his tie moving just to further imply action and direction. And then I'm going to cut his shoulders short here. And this is a hand that I want. I need to pull that elbow in a little bit. Yeah, there we go. And then I'm going to pull his jacket in. So the whole idea is that I'm trying to show that the clothing is moving around. Is that even on camera? What a jerk. So I don't know if you can see that very well, the light blue, but there we go. Now it's better to see. Sorry about that. Look at all these things I'm doing that you can't see. And then we're going to really push this this neck. I tend to like to do that a lot with whatever I'm working on, where I have one guy wearing a buttoned up outfit and one guy not. I think it helps to give you an easy and clear differentiation on character A and character B. And so with that in mind, I'll do a little thing like that for most of the people that I'll put into stories, is that if I have two similar looking characters, I've got to do something that thank you, Seven, for your patience there. I'll do something like that in order to say, here's why this guy's not this guy. So I'm going to roll up his arm, and then I think I want to have this thumb forward, fingers forward. So that's, let's put some legs in on this cat. So these guys are going to go beat somebody up. And so tilt the foot up, show that this is walking, and tilt the foot down to show that this is the previous step of it. Ha! All right. That's as much penciling as I wanted to do today. Well, on this project. I had to do a whole bunch of penciling on something else. So for me, this little moment that spend together is really allowing me to shake my tail, because I've been on the other stuff that I'm working on today. I'm pretty restrained. So this gives me the opportunity to cut loose a little bit and explore some liberation, some liberty in how I'm working. If you're working on one project, power to you. It's important to focus on a thing. It's an opportunity I don't take a lot. I tend to be working on so many things at once. And for me, it's going to sound random here, but for me, the fact that I'm working on so many things simultaneously, I think is a way of myself subconsciously trying to keep a consistency in all of the different things that I'm doing. And by having, so many projects that I'm working on at the same time, there's going to be a communication in there. There's going to be a language in there that's going to come through. And I think that's one of the ways that I've been able to figure out to make things look like they were done by the same hand, even though they're different materials and different formats and different story types. And now, no matter what we do, as much as we'd like to think that, this is so much different than the last thing, there's always a part of you that's going to shine through no matter what. And that's all well and good, but there's a natural thing that we have for unconsciously doing our style and whatever it is that we're working on. That whole artist thing about every artist tends to put their own face in the faces that they're drawing and whatever it is that they're doing. There's truth in that. It's a face you know the best, right? So when you interpret other faces, I can understand them having a foundation of referencing your own face to do so. So I didn't put Post-its down in this yet. I'm going to. I'm going to do something fun in the sun in a second with it. I'm less worried about the accuracy of representation here as much as I'm more interested in getting across story-wise here of movement. So here's an interesting thing to ask people. What is it about your own work? How would you suggest that the work that you yourself do is recognizable as being your own, as recognizable as being done by your hand? Do you think it might be in your pencil process, in your inking process, color, composition, all those millions of things that we as storytellers have to think of that simple writers or single practice people don't have to think about? There's so many things, specifically as the illustrator, you have to consider that I think it makes it very obvious when people do work that it clearly looks like their work because of it, because that you develop that dialogue, that language in your stuff. So if anybody has an answer for that, I'd be keen to hear it. I'd be keen to hear about what it is about your own work that sings your song. So I'm gonna do clean out the nib here. I'm going to do this panel, and then I'm going to put a punch of red on the page here. I'll show you. Okay, I plan on having his coat move, and I'm going to put a little flare out of it right there. I don't expect that people have to answer me. So nobody feel pressured about my questions when I ask them. But I'm just curious, maybe it's a dialogue that you want to have if you do a channel of your own or whatever it is, or you're otherwise engaged and just listening in the background, that's fine. But I am honestly curious about those things when it comes to how other people work. So if anybody ever does if we end up talking in another format or anything like that, feel free to let me know there too. So I don't define the fingers when I'm doing the ink, because I tend to do that when I'm doing the pencils, because I tend to do that when I'm doing the inking process. So. Gary Hodges got an answer for us. Regarding what makes my work recognizably mine, at least for DVSM, I would say it's probably two things: a bit technical and very specific clean, coupled with an emphasis on figures, expressions, hands, etc. Excellent, Gary. Yeah, I would agree with those. I would also arguably suggest that, and again, this is a book that I can't recommend enough to people. Please check out Gary's DBSM books. They are something else, because I think a thing that really clearly makes Gary's work his is a naturalism in his dialogue. That's something that's bandied around a little too much, in my opinion. People ascribe that to guys like Snyder or Bendis, and no, it's Bendis once, but not now. Naturalism in dialogue is when you read the characters as they're speaking, and yeah, that's exactly what that person would say. There's some serious consideration and thought that's gone into these things being said by individuals. So I didn't draw a second hand here. Okay. Maybe for what I do, maybe the recognizable way it's mine is it's messy and it's ridiculous. I've got a penchant for telling ridiculous, making a lot of effort to do a dumb one-liner. Another person that you might want to look at for process is, sorry, my brain just drifts sometimes. I apologize. I'm going to thicken up that face in a second. Dave McKeon, sorry, my brain shut right off. I think your work is more expert messy. There's messy like an amateur would do, and then there's messy that gives away the person has chops. Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah. Judo chops. All right, so I have not bothered with putting in all this elaborate work for a background on this one, because oh, there they are. I dropped my Post-its, that's why. I need a drink. All right, so all right, good fun in the sun. Black. So I'm gonna come in here really light and loose around these guys and just put in a little bit of an environment to them that it really does not matter. That's very nice of you to say that, Gary. Expert messy. I like that a lot. Expert I don't know about. All right. I'm not filling in the entirety of the background. I'm just putting in a suggestive enough shape of form purposely to push a sense of movement. So we've got what's a building underhang or something like that here. That's it's dreamlike without paneled borders or frames. Oh, that's cool. One of the reasons I really don't have panels or frames when I'm working this way is I don't mask them off. And the only reason I really don't get around to masking them off is it's because it's an afterthought for me. It's something I'm not thinking of in advance because I'm really not overly concerned about the bleed edge of something because I can go in now, because now that Christopher has learned such a thing as Photoshoppy exists, I can go in and clean up and tighten up these panels and find some of those things and find some of those panel shapes and find some of those little bit of environmental shapes and contours that we're going to get that we're not going to get. I'm so sorry. If we pre-load all of our panels, if you preset all your panels, then you're going to miss opportunities that allow you to maybe bleed one thing into another, overlap one image over another, to be able to sort of find avenues of exploration in how we can make our viewer's eye move through a shape. And so when I'm working, half the time, I'm not going to put that in there at all. I'm not going to put that border in until the very end, because then that way I'm going to find opportunities along the way. Do you have thoughts on the balance between intuition and artistic whim versus trying to be intentional and deliberate? I think that if you're going to have a modicum of success in the execution of your images, you have got to have an underlying intention, a deliberacy in how you're going about things, an underlying intention in your understanding of foundation, in your understanding of basic principles in composition and basic principles in the things we've talked about moving the viewer through the page, or other things like a degree of representation, and but stylistically applied. You ideally always apply whatever representation that you're doing from your vantage point, but you need an underlying idea of what the story is. You need an underlying idea of the different foundational approaches that you're going to take for executing your story. You need a different, or you need to specifically have a solid grasp on how to work and to follow through on different things and to be open to experience. And then the rest of it is all whimsy. I think that what keeps your energy there, what keeps your investment there of what makes it yours and the voice that you speak with comes through in the rest, in the way that you espouse the dialogue of your line, the way that you espouse the intention of the page and its execution. You can't pre-plan all that. I don't believe that. I think that the people that do pre-plan all that, they lose it in when they get to that stage. There's a really interesting thing. I think it was Dale Sienkiewicz was talking about Neil Adams sketchbooks. And he just loved Neil Adams sketchbooks. And they were at an event together. And he got a chance to take a look at Neil Adams sketchbooks. And he said that the energy and the dynamism that was in his sketchbook was far, far greater than what he had put on the page. Neil Adams, like when you think about that, when you realize that we're talking about a guy who defied a lot of the ways that we would see how pages would get together, how we would see how Batman was interpreted, how we would see so many different things in a new light because of the way that Neil Adams put energy and dynamism in his work. And here's this other artist saying that, yeah, it's got nothing on his sketchbook. There's an intuition in that. It's like you're saying, that artistic whimsy that gets lost, because if you put all of that up front in your sketches, you're not going to have that same thing when it comes to your finished article, your finished product. It's just not going to be there. You're going to have it be more methodical. You're going to have it be a more focused and clean representational line. And if that's what you're going for, exact, perfect, that works. But if you're going for loose, energetic, crazy, over the top, let's say Jamie Hewlett doing Tank Girl, you're not going to have that as if you've laid it all out as a sketch first, because by doing it as a sketch first, you've put that enthusiasm and you put that gesticulation in that sketchbook, so that you're not going to get that when you try to do the finished image. There's I keep a couple of sketchbooks going at any given time, and there's things that I'll do in these sketchbooks. I'm not going to draw these again. And the reason that I'm not going to draw these again is that, there's stuff that's in here, like, a bear in a rowboat. What the hell am I doing? I'm having fun, but I've done it here. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to draw this wreckage yard again with the little robot bear in front of it. There was something in that exploration inspires me for other things, but it doesn't mean I want to replicate it, because I can. I'm going to lose some of the interactions that I found while working along the way. Gary says, yeah, but that makes me think about how I tend to prefer an artist's pencils when I see them, because often they're a bit more dynamic. I really agree with that. There's a guy named Eric Canetti that has a fantastic dynamism in his ink. His pencils are just, on a surface, and then he pulls these energetic lines, and these characters always have this organic flow and distension to their movements and their proportions. That's a rare thing, but it's because his lines are so loose. Look at Karl Kopinski, is another illustrator. Karl does this when he's laying out a page. This is his cowboy that he's drawing, and he's just, here's the hat, and he's gonna, okay. So then he takes his brush and then his brush pen, and then he finds all of those lines after the fact, because he allowed himself to be able to keep that openness for him to have the organic flow when he puts his lines down. So but you're right. If you get the opportunity to look at an artist, an illustrator's pencils, boy, do so, because you find out so many secrets looking at somebody's pencils, somebody's rough work. This is bleach, just standard garden variety household bleach. And it's just a little spritzer that I got at a store. I'm going to keep that from interfering with the piece above. I should have blocked it with my hand. So I've put some ink down, some yellow, some orange, and some brown. And before it gets too far gone and it's fading out, I want to try to stop it by lifting it up and drying it out. But I knew it would reduce it down and give us this kind of fun dispersal, this kind of fun reduction, as though they're fading out. Sorry, as though these characters are not fading out to and off the panel, off the page. So, yippee, 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 yip. I had a lid. I've lost the lid. I found the lid. Okay. So, thanks, Seven. Seven likes my notes. All right. Yeah. So now it's just filling in these images. I'm gonna just be. So you've got an idea of how I'm going to go about finishing this, and then I'll post this. I will go into the Photoshopping and put text and whatnot on it. But the last thing I was going to do is I'm going to take some red paint, okie doke, and I'm going to put blood throughout the page. And have it move through the environment and cut some panels and some squares in that way. And so in the course of doing that, I'm going to have to cover up these panels before I scatter the paint over top of the surface. But there'll be splatter that moves through here in this angle here, because they're about to go into a bad thing. And so I'm intimating that in beforehand by putting the blood in there. That's what these guys are up to, and that's what they're talking about doing on the phone. So that's an intuitive thought that kind of pops in your head as you're going through what the point of the page is. So that sort of illustrates further Gary's note. But it's a balance. It's definitely a balance between the two. And you're going to find your own balance in a very different way than the next person beside you. As it should be. Really, as it should be. So, because you need to speak with your own voice. And, thanks very much, Seven. Blood splatter. Do that sparingly. Some people get a little overwrought and woohoo, blood everywhere in their books, and it just loses its impact. There's an emotional impact of red hitting a thing. When somebody is harmed or gored or wounded in a piece, it should resonate. And if every second page is blood and guts everywhere, there's no impact to that. There's no impact in those panels and in those pages. So this is my palette, by the way. It's just a plastic plate I've been using for at least a dozen years. Every now and then I'll clean it off. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for how your process works and how you go about doing whatever it is that you do. All right. So yeah, I'm just going to get back and finish this guy, and then I'll post it later on today. But I think I'm going to get wrapping up here in a little bit, because I'm coming to my time. In fact, I think I should probably just wrap up now, just because I got to keep track of my blood sugar. It's all about health, folks. So, okay, yeah, I'll have this posted for tomorrow's Instagram, Facebook, and whatnot, telling you about. There's a good comment here. Impact from 7. Yeah, it's all about impact. Violence is more impactful as doled out sparingly. who is it that said? I'm trying to remember who said this. Violence should be distasteful. And in that violence should be distasteful, violence should resonate, violence should have poignance, violence should example that this is something you do not want and do not want to happen to you or to the characters you've got investment in our story, our protagonist, or whoever it is. So that when you put violence in something, it should have real impact and real purpose. And so that when that action happens, you're disgusted and horrified by it. And it makes you want to pay a little more attention to what's going on. And I can't remember who said that. A couple of people have said it over time. I know that Hitchcock said something about the ticking time bomb. And, if you show a bomb, then you should follow the bomb and see when the bomb goes off. And it builds up the suspense and the dramatis right up into that moment. And if you do something awful, then it should count. If someone falls to their doom, you need to follow them down, or you need to have somebody's reaction to that person's death. And that makes it count. And then I can't remember their name right now, but I think it was a director of Old Boy, which is about a man who's locked into a private prison. He's locked into a little prison now someone is making. It looks like a hotel room. And he's kept there for, I think, 15 or 20 years. And because he's a person who's done something to somebody else, and so he's going to pay the cost of doing so. But when certain events happen in that film, certain actions that are truly violent, they count, they resonate, and they're awful. And you think about what it is to have your knee smashed with a hammer. The shot kicks into that. There's a film called The Raid where it's just nonstop punching and kicking and beating the holy camole out of each other. But there's certain moments when it gets down to some of these physical acts, like that are so over the top and so extreme that you can't help but look at it with some sort of interest, but at the same time, sort of concern as somebody's head is bang, bang, bang into a wall. That's awful. Gary says something. Oh, 7 agrees by my Hitchcock reference. Gary says, I think storytelling is about cultivating empathy for characters. So the correct response to violence should be horror fear, imagining how something would feel, not played for delight. Yes and no. Yes, of course, I agree with that for the majority of things. But I also think that it can be used in a really strong and impactful way when looked at it from the perspective of the perpetrator of violence. Because if you want to do an examination of what it is for somebody who's so dissociative on culture and civilization, and somebody who's so dissociative on what it is that their actions, what the consequences of their actions are against other people, then follow them on their escapades into depravity and violence. That's what Kubrick does when he does A Clockwork Orange. We see Alex DeLarge perpetrate a number of awful things on other people. And in the act of doing these awful things on other people, and if you haven't seen Clockwork Orange, okay, spoiler alert, little too late. We're 45 years, 50 years in. He pays the outcome for those actions. And when he pays the outcome for those actions, the perspective on it flips. And it's a fantastic example of when to engage horror and when to actualize horror. So I think it's, oh, sorry, Gary. I should. Yeah, well, we're always on the same page. Yeah, see? The correct response to violence. I agree that the correct response to violence should be horror and not played for delight. I truly agree with that. But I think that you can show horror as exaltation, and I think that you can show horror as this sort of emancipative, liberated, over the top insanity. If you're trying to exhibit this character as embracing all of those things with the intention of growth and development of that character. If your intention is just to do 200, 300, however many issues of Spawn there are, of just nonstop Spawn being Spawn, it's going nowhere. It's just what it is. The story has had all kinds of different things and different actions and the characters. Yeah. But truly, just using that name for an example, or even anything that just gets caught in a loop and it repeats and repeats and repeats, and we're still exposed to that same level of exaltation, or that same capitalizing on the violent acts, the capitalizing on the physical aspect of that gets old. And you can't tell me that somebody has sat down and read every issue of Batman for the entirety of their lifetime, and if they're 30, 40, 50 years old, that's an awful lot of just Batman. I would be concerned for having dinner with this person, because if they're only reading Batman and they've been reading this person exploring these acts of violence against them and violence against others so much for this long of a period, but that's a rut I don't want to see anybody stuck in. But if you're looking at an arc of a character like an Old Boy, or an arc of a character like Alex DeLarge and Clockwork Orange, these things work as strongly as they do. And those two examples that I've given are opposites, by the way. Alex DeLarge it's the exaltation of violence for the comeuppance of it. And then Old Boy is a person who is bottlenecked because a simple action, then they get bottlenecked and restrained and they're brutalized in the sense that they're restricted from existence, and everything about their lives are controlled and maintained in this prison cell. And then when he gets out, good Lord, look out. So that's exaltation in the sense of a good revenge story is a good revenge story. A good I'm coming out to settle matters, and to, like Seven says, he doesn't have sympathy for. They don't have sympathy for bullies. When they get what they deserve, well, man, Batman needs a hug. Hey, look at this, LeDuc. I'm Batman. Yes, you are. There's something to be said for that capitulation that the character arc presents, because there's a turn in Old Boy. And if you haven't seen Old Boy, that's one I'm not going to spoil for you. And if you have the opportunity to see the Asian one as opposed to the North American remake, as good as that is, it's not as good as the original. Do so. Watch it. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but there's massive capitulation in this once this person gets loose from their confined state to enact upon all of those that have enacted upon them for X amount of time. That's huge. But then at the same time, there's comeuppance for that, right? And so which allows the rounding of that arc of that character development, and you're not going to get that. There we go. Thank you, Seven. You're not going to get that if you're just looking at repetitive story arcs, repetitive storytelling. Always. There we go. Thank you, Gary. You're not going to get it. It's not going to happen for you. It's going to be a case of this doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. It doesn't have any emotional impact. It's just violence for violence's own sake, and played for delight, I think is what Gary. Yeah, that's what Gary said earlier. and it doesn't work. Eventually, you got to question your delight. Is what I'm saying. You got to reassess maybe how much delight you're getting it. But anyways, I think I'm going to split at this point. It's been almost 2 hours. I'll finish this page up today, and I'll get this posted for tomorrow. But I'll be back at 2:00 tomorrow. I'm still working on A Village Haunted, but I am enjoying doing one-page comics within 4 people. If anybody has a simple suggestion for a one-page comic idea, please throw it at me. It does not need to be a great, involved, drawn-out process. But of thinking, oh, I really want to think up a good... No, just throw something to the wind. I've done... Chad LeDuc was with us for a second. Oh, he's still here. Hi, Chad. He's thrown a couple ideas at me. They've been some fun. Seven has put forward for, and I think we'll try this tomorrow, Tom Cruise opening a jar of peanut butter. That'll be tomorrow's one-page comic. Tell all your friends, huh? Who doesn't want to watch Tom Cruise opening a jar of peanut butter? Gee, there's the Barney in rehab. Writing it down. So yeah, and if anybody watches this after the live video here has ended and has an idea for one, please put it in the comments. Tune in tomorrow, shout it out then. That's great. But I'm having a lot of fun doing this stuff, and I really appreciate and enjoy interacting with people that are watching it. And Seven's got a fun comment there. Old boy looks like a lion. This madman. His hairstyle is part of his character. It sure was. It sure was. Yeah, there's that great thing you can do with the delineation of personality by how their physical appearance puts out. There's a lot you can say about that. There's a lot that you can explore an example with people from how mad their hair is, or how controlled their appearance is, or the lines in their face, from their experientialism or their age, or the intensity of the look in their eye, or the hurt, the wound in their face. There's so many different ways that we could show characters to be completely mental. That's a real thing in a lot of Asian cultures. To be a bad boy, you dye your hair, or you do something that makes you not conform to the norm specifically. And but the problem with doing those things, and I think that's something we're not really taking stock of a lot these days, is the more that you try to outwardly physically differentiate yourself for everybody around you, the more specifically that you pigeonhole yourself into that for the remainder of your days. I mean, I'm talking about permanent things, right? Like, face tattoos. A terrible example. That's not an extreme example. Okay, it's been a lot of fun. I really like how some of this stuff has happened here. That's some fun stuff we found with bleach. And I'm going to explore this a little bit more. And we've got some fun, different things happening with flecking in there, and the sort of graininess that comes into that image, and the haphazardness of it sort of gives you a feeling of trying to put some of those little things in to have little intimations of instability. So I'm going to pursue that a little bit more in this piece, and I'll do the blood thing that I had mentioned, and we'll see where it goes. And tune in tomorrow, 2:00. Thanks for hanging out. It's been fun. Bye for now. See you tomorrow. Keep creating, by the way.